This means that the geladas don't have to move far to find food. They may only cover about 200 feet a day. This means that the geladas can live at surprisingly high population densities, as many as 180 geladas per square mile. The population is divided into bands of about 30 animals who range over a fairly small area, which may overlap with a neighboring baboon group. If there is exceptionally good grazing to be had, then a number of bands may come together to feed. Young geladas are often carried around on their mother's back, entwining their tail with hers. They're sometimes called bleeding heart monkeys. The bare patch on their chest is more vivid in the female. Geladas need to consume quite a bulk of grass to provide them with the nutrition they require, and this takes up most of their waking hours. The rest of their time is spent grooming. Grooming not only removes parasites from the gelada's fur, as with many primates, it also helps to consolidate bonds within the group. Social cohesion is vital to their survival among the peaks. Geladas in the Simiens have few enemies now that leopard numbers are in decline. Yet they never stray further than a mile or so from the gorge rim. Young geladas make a game of the retreat towards the sleeping ledges. The mature males usually bring up the rear. Males don't reach adulthood until they're 8 years old, while females are able to breed by the time they're 3.5 years old. The dominant male has to maintain his position with aggressive postures and bluff charges. He's constantly being challenged by younger bachelor males. In gelada baboon society, it is the strength of bonds between the adult females which maintains group cohesion rather than male dominance over a harem. Each adult male associates with about 6 females and their young. Young males tend to move around in groups on their own. This time he has successfully rebuffed the attempt to depose him. The lip flip indicates appeasement. Finally, order is restored before the group begins to make the hazardous descent into the abyss of Geech. The camera team planned to film the descent of the geladas down into the abyss of Geech, an extraordinary feat even for such agile creatures. Females seem to have an interval of 2 years between births. This is probably because the young gelada has so much to learn that its chances of survival within the group would be decreased if its mother was not able to give each newborn baboon undivided attention. Play fighting allows the young baboon to interact with other members of the group and also increases the infant's coordination. Gelada society is surprisingly complex. Each young baboon will have to learn over 25 different calls as well as visual signals before it can find its place in the hierarchy. In the 1970s, the gelada baboon population in Ethiopia was estimated to stand at about 500,000. These high numbers only occur where the highlands are untouched by agriculture. As more and more grasslands are used for farming, gelada numbers begin to fall, especially in areas where soil erosion has taken hold. During the 1980s, the geladas also had to cope with heavy drought. They're vulnerable because they're restricted to a narrow range of foods. Before darkness falls, the baboons finally reach the narrow ledges where they will spend the night. The tawny eagle tends to hunt either during the morning or early evening. Though it often spends a lot of time searching for small prey, it's also greatly attracted to carrion. Early each morning, the camera team put out bait on a ledge, hoping to attract the eagles. The bait attracts not only tawny eagles, but also thick-billed ravens. As the sun begins to warm the high plateaus, a tawny eagle climbs upwards, circling in the updraft. It often steals food from other birds, even much larger birds of prey, such as the lammergeier. The tawny eagles and ravens are soon followed by other scavengers, Egyptian and hooded vultures. The ravens are not intimidated by these small vultures and defend their spoils. No one's quite sure why this species of raven has evolved such an enormous bill. Even with such a massive bill, the ravens can't tear. It's left to the vultures to rip the meat apart with their sharp bills and talons. Though baiting allowed the camera team to obtain shots of the birds feeding on the ground, the most dramatic behavior occurs once they're airborne, soaring above the void. All avian scavengers need to be able to soar for long periods of time using warm updrafts so that they can scan the ground for carrion. They're quick to learn where the easiest pickings can be found. Many of the ravens became camp followers, feeding on scraps right beside the cameras. While one bird feeds beneath the tripod, the camera is turned on a courting pair high up the cliff. Raven courtship is quite complex, involving fluffing out of the neck feathers, bowing and arching of wings, and tumbling display flights. Often they preen each other. Usually the bird concentrates on its partner's throat, lifting the feathers with the flat of the bill and peering intently at the exposed roots of the feathers to check for parasites. A breeze begins to stir the branches of the giant heath, and the ravens launch themselves into the wind in an extraordinary aerial display. They may be trying to pull off twigs for nest building. Only ravens and other birds can reach the high crags where one of the Simien's rarest mammals lives. There are more than 300 walia ibex living in these mountains. It seldom comes down below 10,000 feet. They tend to cover fairly small distances every day, weaving their way across the rocky crags along narrow paths in search of stands of giant heath, which they browse on and also use for shelter. The park staff, consisting of a warden and 18 rangers, patrol the more accessible ibex tracks. The ibex was fairly common until the 1930s. Soon after, it was overhunted. Agriculture also began to move up the slopes and invade the ibex's domain. In the 1960s, the population had fallen to only 200. The establishment of the park gave the ibex some protection, and gradually the population recovered, but it's still regarded as an endangered species. The ibex are poached illegally for their enormous horns, which are used as drinking vessels. Villagers also trap them for meat and hides. Ibex are fairly easy animals to snare. Their trails are easily spotted and are so narrow that there is nowhere for the animal to go to avoid the trap. The local people weave their snares from grass. But for most of the year, male ibex stay well beyond the poacher's reach on the loneliest, steepest slopes far above the grassland. Males remain separate from females and their young, only coming together during the time of the rut. Usually the males stay among the highest, least accessible crags, while females and young feed on the more sheltered slopes lower down. For this reason, females are encountered far more often than males. The young kids are able to follow their mothers over the roughest terrain. During the breeding season, male ibex are on a constant lookout for receptive females. But most females, like this one being propositioned by a large male, already have kids with them. The obvious breeding success of the remaining population is a hopeful sign for the future. As long as agriculture doesn't encroach any further into the grasslands, the ibex has hopes of recovery. Nothing is wasted in this harsh land. Any ibex that falls to its death provides a meal for the scavengers. The lammergeier, or bearded vulture, is able to catch small reptiles and birds, but it mainly feeds on carrion. It prefers to feed on fresh meat, but as it's unable to defend a carcass against other scavengers, it's often forced to scavenge from older carcasses. It can swallow bones whole. Unlike other vultures, it's able to exploit this source of food by dropping bones which are too large to swallow onto the rocky ground below, where they crack open, exposing the marrow inside. It's attracted to steep escarpments and ridges, which create strong thermals that allow it to glide effortlessly and cover vast distances as it scans the ground below. The lammergeier often follows ibex and klipspringers during the breeding season, when it may be able to benefit from stillborn kids. Klipspringers live in much the same rugged terrain as the ibex, though their small size and pointed hooves enable them to take advantage of even smaller footholds. They move about in small family groups of a male, female, and their young. They often post lookouts on a high vantage point to give an alarm whistle if danger threatens. Even when the cameraman throws a stone in amongst them, this family refuses to move. It's only when he imitates the whistle of a rival male that the male moves closer to investigate. He comes nearer and nearer, bringing the rest of his family with him. Though the klipspringers are wary, the shyest and rarest animal that the camera team wanted to film was the Simien fox. Every day they scanned the grass slopes in search of this mysterious creature. It is so seldom seen that no one is even sure whether it's truly a fox or a wild dog. It stays in a den hidden amongst the rocks during the day. It's most commonly seen at dawn or dusk, though in undisturbed areas it is seen during the day. It mainly lives on grass rats, which live here in very high densities. Local people often accuse the fox of preying on young livestock, but there is no evidence to support this. Apart from man, it has few other natural enemies in its wild domain, though it is vulnerable to rabies. The soaring lammergeier has the best viewpoint of this wild mountainous region. Its remoteness has saved it from the worst ravages of civil war. A solution can be found to save both the people and the wildlife of this remote and mountainous region.
South America's giant otter, a creature on the edge of extinction, is profiled next Saturday night at the same time, 8 o'clock.